Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my dear friend and co host, Jacob Acquire. Me and Jacob go all the way back to 2016. We were not dorm mates, but we lived on the same hall in the initial dorm that we lived in Samford at UNC Charlotte. And dating back to those days, there was a very, very heated topic that we would typically discuss in regards to the NBA, and it was about LeBron James and his ranking and kind of the NBA all time list. And so, Jacob, with last night potentially being LeBron James' last game in the NBA, I want to kind of let you open the floor with where do you think he falls all time if last night truly was his last game?
Well, let's get one thing straight. Last night was not his last game. I feel like LeBron, he might say that he doesn't want a retirement season, but I think he does. He's someone who enjoys the spotlight, so I think we will see him play more games. Over or last week on Friday, talking about 2016. 2016 was the last year that Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith were the hosts on First Take on ESPN. And I'm just realizing now, Perfect Takes, First Takes, you could say we're the spiritual successors to that duo. But Skip Bayless was back on the show for the first time in 10 years last week, and he said he has LeBron ninth all time on his list. And he had some people. Obviously, it's a little bit of bait, but he had like Magic Johnson ahead, Larry Bird, obviously Michael Jordan, and I don't recall the rest. That maybe Wilt Chamberlain, Shaq were on there. I'm not gonna go that far.
I mean, that's the
Um,
definition of being blinded by nostalgia at that rate. Like that's crazy to consider he'd be anywhere outside the top five.
yeah, I'm not gonna go that far. He's gonna land at two for me. He's been at two for probably the last 10 years. It's just hard for me to get past Michael being 6 for 6 in the finals, uh, defensive player of the year, more all defensive teams than LeBron, and to this day is still the leading scorer in points per game. And he did this without a functioning 3 point shot. So if he had a better 3 point shot like LeBron did throughout his career, we could see Jordan averaging 35 a game instead of 30, which and he's still the only player to ever average 30 points per game. There are different eras. It's hard to compare across eras, but I think when you compare accolades and just overall body of work, I think Jordan did more in the 15 years he played than LeBron has done in he's on what 21 now, 22. I don't know which 23 maybe because he started 03. That was his rookie year. So this might be season 23 for him. Um, but he's always going to be number two for me. I think Victor Wembanyama could eventually pass both of those guys. He's unique enough to where I think he has that potential. If Steph Curry had won a couple more rings, I'd throw him in the convo too, just because as Steph's career goes on, and as Steve Kerr, the Warriors head coach, who was re-signed recently, his career goes on and on. I think less of Steve Kerr as a creative mind when it comes to basketball, and I think that Curry kind of propped up a lot of those teams. You look at Team USA the last time when Steve Kerr was in charge, as Greg Popovich stepped back. Those rotations were kind of stunk, right? It was Curry and LeBron saving the Team USA in the Olympics that year. We almost lost to Serbia, to France, but it was Curry and LeBron carrying there. So I think Curry deserves a nod in the top, let's say 5 to 7, probably 4 rings. Only the one Finals MVP, but what he did to revolutionize the game from a 3 point shooting perspective, I think is special. But it would
You
be one and two for me. Would be Jordan and LeBron James.
you could argue Curry impacted the game more than either Jordan or LeBron. And I want to be very clear
Maybe
about
the
how
maybe the game of how basketball is played. Like Jordan
and
took the game and made it
yes.
global, right?
And yes, and LeBron made it mobile is the saying. Like
Hmm.
those two impacted the game from like a brand standpoint because they were
Right.
just so good. But Steph Curry actually like changed the game from an evolution standpoint. Like, hey, jumpers are obsolete. Like you just need to be able to make a layup or shoot the three. And you saw what that did with the Houston Rockets a few years later after the Warriors go on and win 73 games in the regular season. So just a lot of impact from that standpoint. And here in Charlotte, like what you saw LaMelo and Con Knipple do, becoming the first like team duo since Steph Curry and Klay Thompson to lead the NBA in 3-point shots, like or 3 points made. Like it's just it's cool. It's very cool to see the evolution there. But yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to argue against Michael Jordan's six finals appearances, six championships. He was clutch when it mattered. Like it's very much like Tom Brady in the NFL kind of situation when you look at a guy who's just who got there so frequently and who won so often. And I no knock against LeBron. It was just after he got out of the Eastern Conference Finals, I he didn't have the juice in the finals. And I think it's very fair to hold that Dallas Mavericks performance
Yeah, that's
against
the
him.
one, right?
Yeah,
Because obviously the Warriors teams, he's not beat. No one's beaten those teams.
and the Spurs, after you win your second ring and you take them to game seven, like they were a much better team and more complete team than that Miami team that rolled into the finals and was injured. So, like, again, had you win that Mavericks finals and Dirk ended a lot of people's careers on route to that championship. He was beating like Kobe, he
Kobe
was
and
beating
Powell.
KD.
Mhm.
Like there were people he beat en route where it was very. I think they even beat the Spurs, who were then in the finals several years later. So it was just like Dirk did his part, and he cemented, I would say, his legacy as a all time great. But again, like if you want to put LeBron over MJ, it's those kind of series that kind of were defining for LeBron early on, even though he was much more clutch, I think, in his second stint with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But let's get into football. This show is not about basketball. It was a cool kind of side tangent to talk about something we have discussed for a very long time on hours on end to kind of just briefly touch on that with LeBron's legacy and LeBron's career kind of coming to a close and ahead. Today we're going to be talking about kind of the importance or the usage of 12 personnel, these two tight end sets in the NFL, how it relates to the Carolina Panthers, what we might see from Brad Idzik as the new play caller. And this is where I want to turn it over to you because a lot of Panthers fans leading up to the draft, going into the offseason, were like, hey, what if we sign a guy like David Njoku? What if we draft a guy like Kenyon Sadiq? Or we even talked about extensively getting a guy like Oscar Delp out of Georgia. We didn't draft a single tight end for the first time in Dan Morgan's tenure, yet we had the eighth highest usage in 13 personnel, the 11th highest in 22 personnel. We used a lot of two tight end sets for the most part. Is that something we're going to see with the current roster construct, or are we going to be pivoting now with Idzik as the new play caller?
I don't think it's going to be too different, considering Idzik's been with Dave Canales for seems like forever, right? Even going back to Seattle. And Idzik was in charge of making the game plans last year. So I think it's going to be more of the same. I would like to see more potentially explosive pass plays called instead of running the ball 30 times and then saying, "All right, Bryce, you just got to air it out and hopefully we win." And that's how we would get some of those clutch wins. I'd like to see some of those called earlier because we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Bryce Young, one of his best passes is the go ball. He's one of the best go ball throwers in the NFL. So I'd like to see more of that. But as it pertains to 12 personnel, it's going to the roster's more of the same, right? The only tight end they added was Felipe Franks, who was here 2 years ago, and he's a primary special teams player. He might not make the roster. He's fighting for that tight end four spot with James Mitchell, who was on the 53-man roster last year. I think that number one, the board probably fell to the point to where they probably wanted some of these tight ends and didn't get them. I don't know if Sadiq was ever there in the first round, but Oscar Delp going before the Panthers pick in the third round. You saw that crazy run on blocking tight ends that started with the Jaguars in the late second round. So maybe they wanted somebody, but ultimately pivoted to other positions, which I think the team needed the other positions they drafted. But I think we're going to see more of the same. I wouldn't expect the personnel usage rates to vary too much based on what they were last year. And I think that the players the Panthers have are capable of doing that. We have to remember JT Sanders as a rookie looked really good as a receiving option up until he sustained that neck injury against the Chiefs where he Like he landed on top of his head. And then last year, a lot of the reporting out of training camp was that uh, Jatavian Sanders was the best player, and then he has the ankle injury to start the season. So he started the season off on a an injured ankle. So hopefully he's able to build off of that rookie year and a full year of participation in the offseason program. But Dan Morgan has insisted they like the group there with the tight ends, and the Dave Canales offense doesn't really utilize tight ends a whole lot. So I think we'll see a lot of the two tight end stuff for blocking. But as far as tight end receiving production, I'm not I'm not going to bet on the over on any of these guys. I think we're going to see the occasional slip out, like with Mitchell Evans. He was very good at it last year, where they would start a series in 12 personnel and he would leak out down the seam for like a 12-yard gain. I think of the Cowboys game, the first reception that Bryce threw was about like 21, 22 yards to Mitchell Evans on a look like that. I think we'll see some of that, but I wouldn't expect it to differ too much. You got to think we also didn't add any other receivers other than Chris Brazel and John Mechie. Are they going to be taking tight end reps when we're in heavy sets? I don't think so because they're not blocked. Like maybe they move Lee Get inside to block more, but I think we're going to be seeing a lot of the same stuff based on the additions this offseason.
I like that you brought up the wide receivers we brought in. And I think a characteristic of those kind of wide receiver body types and a John Mechie or Chris Brazel or Brazel is this idea that they're a bigger wideout. And I'm not going to necessarily say their calling card is blocking, but I think you'd feel much more confident in 11 personnel handing the ball off to Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, one of your tailbacks, and having an advantage blocking against like your everyday nickel package that
Mm-hmm.
a team or a defense is going to use against 11 personnel. And
Well,
the
that
one
was Bryson Tremaine's whole role last year on the team was to be the blocking receiver.
and he's a bigger dude, and like I don't want to use this as a knock against Jimmy Horn. He's a very explosive player, but he's somebody that's not going to allow you to disguise what you're doing pre-snap. If he's on the field, more than likely it's a gadget play, it's a pass play. You're cued into what may happen. Where if you have these bigger wide receiver body types like a Bryson Tremaine that you just brought up, like they are going to cause the defense to kind of pause and figure out what exactly they're looking at.
Bryson Tremaine, Xavier Leggett, Jalen Coker as well. Coker's a little bit thicker than T Mac and Brazel. All three of those guys can be your blocking options there. You can your disguise receivers, if you will, the Cooper Cup role that he perfected so many years ago in LA. And I think with Coker, I think we're going to see Coker primarily as the slot guy because that's where he was supposed to be prior to him getting injured. Right after the team traded Adam Thielen, mind you, at the start of the year, that was supposed to be his role. So if you line up in the slot, naturally you're closer to the line of scrimmage, so you can do some of the block or to the offensive line, excuse me. So you can do some of the blocking stuff from there to try to chip the outside guy or the wide nine guy and let Chris Brazel and T Mac run routes. I like that a lot. And just looking at the bodies in the receiver room, like you talked about, a lot of big dudes, right? So they don't necessarily need so many tight ends out there to run plays when Bryson Tremaine can be your second tight end, his like the de facto second tight end, right?
And the point of bringing all this up is that you want to be able to show pass on 11 personnel and be able to feel comfortable handing the ball off. And vice versa, the whole point of why offenses are starting to get into 12 and 13 personnel is because of the personnel match. That in order for the defense to feel comfortable about stopping the run, they feel like they have to kind of take away a defensive back and add a linebacker into the lineup. And so when you're in these base packages, it makes it a lot easier to then pass on you. So when you look at kind of how defenses have matched 13 personnel, it's been around 75%. They roll out base package. And so a counterpoint to this, I think, on the defensive side for the Carolina Panthers is you look at as a Key Wheatley or a Will Lee that were added in the draft. Those are bigger guys to where you feel comfortable. You can still stay a nickel as a defense and match up against these bigger personnel packages that the other offense is rolling out. And so vice versa, when the Panthers are in 12, 13, 22 personnel and they get bigger, the goal is that the defense is then matching that with base personnel so that, yes, when you fake the run and you have a play action, you have Mitchell Evans on like a leak play and you're able to pick up 10, 12, 15 yards, get an explosive play, get a first down, move the chains and kind of keep your offense in rhythm. And so it will be very interesting to see kind of how well the Panthers blend the pass and the run when they're either in 11 personnel or one of these heavy personnel packages. So that was kind of the cue in with this section is kind of talk about like why are offenses doing this and what is the counter? And I feel like at least on the defensive side, while we didn't really beef up the tight end or the running back room, you can bring up like a AJ Dillon, but for the most part, it seemed like we beefed up the defensive side of the ball so that we could match these heavier sets that offenses are starting to roll out more and more.
I think the LA Rams are ahead of it on both fronts, right? We've talked about them being the blocking receiver team, the 11 personnel team that can play into a personnel because one of their receivers can block. They're ahead of it there, but they also played the most dime packages out of every team in the league. They probably play more dime than every other team combined. But obviously that's not true, but it felt like it, right? They were probably in dime, nickel or dime 80+% of the time. That's because their DBs, well, number one is because their linebackers, not great, but their DBs could also tackle. And I think that is the counter to the heavy personnel set, the disguised 12 personnel with your blocking receiver. It's getting the stronger, longer defensive backs. And Will Lee, Zakee Wheatley, guys that we drafted last year. Trayvon Merrick, I think, is the perfect kind of match safety for that. And then your corners on the outside also have to be able to contribute in the run game. Both J.C. Horn and Mike Jack are like larger corners, right? So I think the Panthers defense, the way they built it, perfectly or is a perfect counter to the style that we're seeing, being able to pass out of 12, run on 11, that kind of thing. And I think the Panthers did a very good job this over the last couple years of building. Really, the one thing I would say is you brought up the running backs. I wonder how the run game is going to look out of these different personnel sets because you're, I guess you're swapping Jonathan Brooks for Rico Dowdle one for one. You hope Brooks is healthy and that he's as explosive he was in those limited snaps we saw his rookie year. And then AJ Dillon, I don't know if he would be more of a fullback. I certainly hope he can be like the 4th and 1 like halfback dive guy because he's big enough to do that. But the question that I have for stuff like this is how are the Panthers going to run out of that set? Because I don't think our run game was super dynamic. You look at Chuba Hubbard, and this is a stat that I think fantasy points data had last week. Chuba Hubbard was the lowest in explosive run percentage out of all running backs that had 50 or more attempts. He had 0% explosive run rate. So that means he had 0 runs of 15 or more yards last year, which
I
seems off, but like when I
it
think
was
about it,
definitely accurate. Like the
yeah,
only
he doesn't
explosive runs we
have
had were
explosive
Rico.
runs. Yeah. And even going back to 2 years ago when Chuba took over as the starter, I can think of like 3 runs. And one was in the Bears game when Andy Dalton started, one was to win that Cardinals game. And I think there was one in the Giants game in Germany, but he's not an explosive runner. So they didn't really add anybody in the running back room other than Dillon, who's not an explosive runner. Hopefully, Jonathan Brooks is that guy this season. I think it would help, like all the different personnel packages that we use, it would help blend the run on the pass game.
We've discussed this ad nauseum, but the whole point of the Rico Dowdle 1 year signing last offseason was that it bought you time on Jonathan Brooks. Like this was a player you invested a second round pick in. You clearly was going to miss his second year with his second ACL tear. And you go, hey, can we get a rental so Brooks can get 100% and he brings that element to the offense because Chuba isn't that guy. AJ Dillon, who we brought in, isn't that guy. They play very specific roles. The whole point of having Chuba Hubbard in the building is he picks up 5 or 6 yards. He keeps you on schedule as an offense. He's not the guy ripping off the home runs. He's the guy hitting the singles and the doubles that keep you on track. And so AJ Dillon, like you said, that's a short yardage back situation. I don't know if he's as much a fullback, like going back to the 12 personnel. I'd much rather have like a Tommy Tremble or a Mitchell Evans as a lead blocker as opposed to AJ Dillon. But it's hard to ignore Quadzilla with just how big his lower body is and his frame is, and hopefully he's able to impact the game in a meaningful way on Sundays. But to get into our last segment, Chuba Hubbard was one of our day three gems as a Panthers draft connoisseur. You look at like our history since 1995. He's one of those guys that after pick 100 we kind of hit on. And our last segment today is talking about the top 5 hits and misses past pick 100. And the point of this is to show kind of the hit rate is that it's very, very rare to find quality starters on day 3 of the draft. And it's very easy to hit on quote unquote a miss and just miss on a player, miss on a pick, because those guys aren't expected to be much more than just a role player, a bench player, practice squad kind of guy. And so this is where I want to turn it over to you. Does Chuba Hubbard make your top 5, or does he fall just outside of it in kind of the honorable mention category?
He probably would make the top 5. I went back like all the way to the start and went that way. So from 1995 and up. And obviously Chuba is a more recent player. Looking at it, I would probably put him over one or two of these guys. Yeah. So I think he would come in fourth or fifth on my list for the hits. Do you want to start with the hits or do you want to start with the misses here?
Let's start with the hits since we're
Okay.
talking about Chuba. Who do you have at number 5 in your top 5 hits? After, again, stipulations on this exercise is it has to be after pick 100 and it does not include undrafted free agents. So for all our listeners, unfortunately, Jalen Coker will not be listed in this exercise, even though he is a phenomenal player. Everybody kind of has shots at quote unquote UDFAs. To me, these are players that you are designating actual draft capital to, and we're trying to see kind of over the course of the Panthers' history who this team has hit on.
So I'm going to start with an honorable mention. Uh, all the way back in 1997 in the seventh round. I want to get the pick right. Yeah, pick 228 in the seventh round. We got Chris Mangum. He had an okay season that year, just over 1,000 yards over his Panthers career. That was an honorable mention. But I didn't really rank these, but I'll say number 5, I guess, now that I'm looking at him, is going to be much more recent. And I don't know if you'll have this guy on your list. 2019, sixth round, pick 212 is tackle Dennis Daly. And that name is going to be like, oh, God, he wasn't that good, was he? He wasn't super good, but he started only a handful of games for the Panthers, but he played in 54 different games throughout the end of the Ron Rivera and early Matt Rule era. Played both tackle spots. I think he played right guard as well. And out of all the Matt Rule linemen that we had, like thinking like Pat Elfline, Cam Irving, the center from Matt Paradis, like all Russell Okung, all these guys that Matt Rule had, Trent Scott, Michael Jordan, the NFL guard Michael Jordan, not to be confused with the Michael Jordan we talked about at the start of this episode, even though they're both 6'6". Out of all of those guys, I think Dennis Daly was the most competent player, and of course, it wasn't somebody that Rule or Fitterer added; they inherited him, and I think he was a versatile swing lineman during that era where we needed competent linemen. He was one of the only ones.
It's fascinating to go with a 6th round pick because the guy in my 5th spot is also a 6th round pick, but he was taken in the 2022 draft, not the 2019 draft. And the reason why I lean towards Cade Mays at 5 over Dennis Daly is Dennis Daly, it felt like uh, you started him because somebody was hurt. Cade Mays felt like a starter. At least that's what he started to turn into last year. And that's what the Lions paid him for this offseason. So if he kind of takes that step in that second contract and he's a quality starter, I think he will end up surpassing Dennis Daly. So this is somewhat of a projection because his career is not over. Currently, Dennis Daly is not an active player in the NFL. So for me, Cade Mays gets that 5th spot. Again, another 6th round pick that I think really contributed to the Carolina Panthers and will have real contributions in the NFL moving forward.
I thought about Mays, and then I came back to him getting cut, and then coming back to the Panthers, and that kind of took him off the list for me. And if he's going to get better, his best exploits are going to be on another team. And so, like a guy like Harrison Butker, who the Panthers drafted, obviously, and he never played a non preseason snap for the team. I can't really, or I didn't really want to include that there. My number four pick, let me, yeah, I guess I'll call this guy number four. I'm going to go to 2012. This is another sixth rounder, and it is punter Brad Nortman with the
Wow.
207th pick, 96 games. He stayed for 5 or 6 seasons out of Wisconsin, and he was pivotal in the playoff runs that we had. I know he got injured in some of the good parts there, but a punter that sticks around for 5 years, as somebody you drafted, I'm not going to turn that down.
That's interesting. I'm not big on drafting special teams players. We'll talk about in the five worst picks on day three. Another special teamer on that list, but
Another sixth rounder, probably.
yes, more than likely when we get to that point. But for my fourth spot, it's a guy that we talked about before this section, and it's Chuba Hubbard. This is a player that I think really made the most of his opportunities behind Christian McCaffrey. I feel like there were some growing pains his rookie season, but he's continued to get better, and that's what earned him a second contract. This is probably one of the only hits in the Matt Rule Scott Fitterer era in terms of like a dart throw on day three. I know I just brought up Cade Mays, but Chuba Hubbard really felt like the one guy we hit on in day three that continued to kind of make an impact as a Carolina Panther. So that's who I have at pick four or slot four. At your third pick, who do you have as a top five hit all time?
We're probably both going to have this guy, maybe both at number three, but I'm going to go to 2009, the last pick in that draft, seventh round pick 216, Captain Munnerlin. Look, he had his ups, he had his downs. He went to Minnesota, cashed in and went to Minnesota, came back, but he was a good player for Carolina. 30 or 154 games in his career, not a ton of starts, but 12 interceptions total in his career, 10 sacks, and he played up until 2018, so a 10-year career across two teams. He was, I wouldn't say pivotal, but I think he was a good leader in that transition era between the Super Bowl run we had and the next group of defenders, like going into the Brian Burns era. I think he was a pivotal guy there, so he's going to be my number three out of my top five hits.
It's interesting that you have him at three. I do have him on this list, but he's a little bit higher. The player I have at three is a player that's a little bit more controversial, but he also did have a Pro Bowl nod and was looking like he was going to take a step across from Charles Johnson. And I'm going to go Greg Hardy, sixth
I
round
thought
pick.
about him. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really the off-field issues, but when you rack up 40 sacks as a player, you do get a Pro Bowl nod. Like he played 75 games and you're a 6th round pick. Like it was the off-field issues that I think would make you leave him off this list if anything, because I think when you're looking at the criteria of just like performance on the field, Greg Hardy gave that to you. And so for me, he's at my number 3. I couldn't put him any higher because of kind of the off-field issues again, but this is a player that I think really stepped up and was pivotal in the Carolina Panthers going 12-4 in 2013 and getting the number 2 seed that year, which I think then also allowed this team to grow and get to a point where they made the Super Bowl push in 2015.
wasn't on that Super Bowl team though.
He wasn't, no, but
Right.
I'm more saying like the domino effects that came from that season. He was still such a huge contributor. The big game that sticks out is the Panthers Saints game in the rain, and obviously Luke Kuechly has 24 tackles that game, but Greg Hardy had a sack, and there were key plays where he was generating pressure and forcing the ball out of Bree's hands probably a little bit sooner than he wanted to.
Yeah, the game I remember him most for was the during the Super Bowl run when he was on the Cowboys crying on the sideline because we were smacking him. He left
It
off
was a
my
good
list
memory, a good memory.
for the off field stuff, and had he continued his career and made an impact, he probably makes the list for me. I assume you have Captain Munnerlin at two.
I do.
All right, because number one's going to be
And
obvious.
and it's
Uh,
because he had pick sixes. I think again, going back to
yeah,
that 2013 season, there were some like cool plays. Like he would give up a big play, but he'd also make those big plays. So that was like the Dante Jackson cycle. That's what Captain Munnerlin gave you as a seventh round pick. But yeah, that is who is at my two.
I forgot about the Dante Jackson cycle. I have a different defensive back at number two, and which means you didn't even have him in your honorable mentions, which is kind of crazy. Trey Boston. He was the 128th pick in 2014. Obviously, it was a good part of the Super Bowl run there in the 2014 playoff season. I think he was a good safety for us. We had starters in place ahead of him in the early years, but I think he was somebody who was pivotal, and he was another one of the leaders in that stretch, like between 2016 through 2018. So he's making my list, and he played till 2020, and he's still 15 interceptions, I should add, and he's still a Panthers fan at heart. Like on Twitter, he'll talk about how good the Panthers have done. He calls them like our team, like we just won a game. Ultimate player, ultimate Panther, and so he's number two for me.
The reason why he didn't make the list is I always feel like the defensive unit is as strong as its weakest link. And that can be said outside of the world of football. But for me, Trey Boston was always the weakest link on those defenses. At times on the back end. Like
I would
he
think Captain Munnerlin is just as weak.
but Munnerlin was a starting cornerback, which is a little bit more valuable of a position, and I thought he was actually a good slot player. For me, like Boston, like he benefited from playing with everybody on that back end, and he did make some plays. But for me, when I was looking at kind of the criteria, I was looking at like weighted AV from Pro Football Reference, and just to kind of list off the AV, Captain Munnerlin finished with 35, where Trey Boston finished with 28 in his career. So Munderland was a little bit higher. The only guys that were lower are currently active players in Chuba Hubbard with 27 weighted AV and Cade Mays with 11. And I'm counting on those guys to go up a little bit. But for me, I thought Trey Boston, a lot of his flowers came because of how dominant the front seven was in front of him and the players he was playing with on the back end. Like Kurt Coleman, for instance, like that kind of safety duo allowed Trey Boston to kind of flourish, and it didn't feel like he was a guy that was holding down his own or a guy that was truly in man coverage in various situations. So that's why he got left off my list. He was definitely in my honorable mentions, but not a guy that made my top five.
So I'm
And
guessing
I'm not
Ian
trying to hate
Thomas
on him. I
is
want to make that
your
clear. Great player. Yeah, Ian Thomas is my
yeah,
number one if you
no.
didn't know already. But yeah,
No,
I just
it's obvious. Josh Norman has got to be the number one guy. All pro or he was all pro, right? Just I
Yeah,
don't want
no, he
to
got an All
get that
Pro in
wrong, right?
2015, but it
Yeah.
was only that year, and I think that's his only
He
Pro
had,
Bowl year too,
yeah,
as
Pro
well.
Bowl year as well, but phenomenal corner that year in an era where you had corners like Patrick Peterson, right? You had Richard Sherman. I think Stephon Gilmore like had just stepped onto the scene as well, and he really shined that year. Obviously, it was the 1 year wonder for that level of play, but he was pivotal, excuse me, on probably the Panthers' best season, or not probably, definitely considering 15-1, setting records which were broken a couple years ago in the NFC Championship. But we couldn't have done it without him, so he has to be number one.
What's interesting is was it Coastal Carolina he went to? I believe it was
Yes.
Coastal. And what was interesting is he came out and for lack of a better word, he needed some braces. And so he got braces, I think, his rookie year. And it's very easy, like when you're wide receivers and cornerbacks that kind of like pick on and kind of get underneath players' skins. And he had a running kind of like nickname. Like there were guys that teased him for it. And so 2012, the one big memory I had of him as a rookie, the Carolina Panthers went to Chicago. We were up most of the game at some point early in the game. Josh Norman, I believe, had his only interception his rookie year. Like he was making plays, but then Jay Cutler rallies the guys, and the Bears end up pulling off the game because Sean McDermott decided to play very soft coverage at the end of the game, which was a very
Oh,
telling
interesting.
staple of the Ron Rivera era. So yes, as
Something we saw this past years that we've seen the
with
past
the
few
Buffalo
years as
Bills.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, yes, there are echo chambers and things happen for a reason or get duplicated. for various defensive philosophies. But going back to that, I knew Josh Norman was special because he was a very rangy athlete, but you could definitely tell there was a psychological aspect. And as soon as the braces came off, at the end of the 2014 season, he was a big reason why the Panthers ended up making the playoffs and winning the division at 7-8-1. And you could kind of tell he was like kind of becoming a rising star. And Dave Gettleman didn't want to pay him that off season. Josh Norman bet on himself. He was a first team All Pro and got to a point where, hey, the Panthers didn't want to pay him. They believe, was it a trade to Washington or did he just, I think it was just a walk
It
to
was free
Washington.
agency.
We
Yeah.
rescinded the franchise tag and he just walked. But one of those instances where he was that instrumental piece for the Panthers making the Super Bowl run. And without him, we would not have made it. There were so many games in prime time and just your 1 o'clock games as well, where he was making a play. And it started in week 1 with his pick six. The next big play I remember was like week 3 or 4 against the Saints at home, and we're going up against the backup quarterback. We had kind of clawed our way back into the game, took a lead, and the backup quarterback, I believe it was one of the McCown brothers. I think it was Luke, not Josh though. Tries to throw a pass to Brandon Cooks, and Josh Norman just reaches out. And he did this on a Sunday night football game against the Eagles a few weeks later. But just that length I was talking about that you could see his rookie year, it came to pass. He was able to pick off the ball, and he did the slit the throat with the football when he got up. And it was just, he was so cold that year, and he was a big part of that 2015 season that will never be forgotten.
I don't know if you remember, but he was also on the team in 2022. They
Yes.
signed him. It was Steve Wilkes. He signed him like week 14 or something. Toward the end of the, because I think what J.C. Horn would have been hurt, C.J. Henderson might have been hurt. I don't know. All the guys were hurt, and Norman played sparingly toward the end of that year. Wasn't very good, but he was past his prime at that point. But still, an all-time Panther great. Panthers don't have a ton of all pros, so when you get one past pick 100, I think you have to put him at the top of the list. Now the misses. All right, you and I were talking about this beforehand because you can really look at anybody who just didn't make the team and they could be a miss, but there are a few that stick out for other reasons, like maybe they're annoying, maybe we personally had expectations and they fell short. But I have a few of those guys, and I'm going to start with Chris Winkie, the quarterback from Florida State, Heisman winner, if I'm not mistaken, from Florida State. He just didn't do anything for the Panthers. He was a fourth round pick 106. In his career, he has less than 4,000 yards, 15 touchdowns to 26 interceptions. It just wasn't very good. He does have 6 rushing touchdowns, I believe, but wasn't good. And I get it; it's a fourth round quarterback. The expectations aren't super high, but you're a Heisman winner. Come on, I need a little bit more out of you, right? And I know Johnny Manziel didn't have the most stellar NFL career, but when you are the most outstanding player, I just need something. And Chris Winkie really didn't give it to you, and it led to Panthers getting Jake Delhomme and having that full run. But yeah, it's the blemish on a draft year in which you had Dan Morgan in the first round, Panthers general manager, Chris Jenkins, Steve Smith, guys that will push you to the Super Bowl. Then the next guy was Chris Winkie, who just didn't do anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of this exercise is going like, hey, like the day 3 players don't tend to be your pivotal playmakers. It's guys taken in rounds 1 through 3, and that's what makes hitting on those so critical for building a team that can go to the playoffs, that can make a postseason run, et cetera, et cetera. I would you count Chris Winkie as like your 5th or your first? Like where on the scale did you start with the worst? Like is he the worst of the worst, or is he like towards the bottom of the worst?
They're all the same to me,
Okay,
except for
you're
there's one guy that we alluded to earlier. He's going to be my, like, I guess biggest miss or like most hated pick. We talk another special teamer that we'll talk about during the Matt Rule era. He's going to be number 1, but the rest of the guys you can just blend together as tied for second, I guess.
the guy I'll throw out because and we talked about this pre-recording that I wanted to bring Corn Elder into this because of just some of the moments he had as a starter. or in playing time were just so horrendous and atrocious that it just makes you want to pull your heart out as a fan. Uh, for me, I kind of pivoted and it kind of like what you said. It's like players that didn't even start games that had no impact on the field. And I'm going to start with a quarterback that was taken in 2005 in the fourth round. And the reason why I'm going to include this is because Jake Delhomme, he gets injured in 2006 with his thumb injury. He then has the elbow injury in 2007, comes back in '08, and then 2009. I'm almost positive Matt Moore was an undrafted free agent, but we had the pivot to different quarterbacks. Chris Winkie even had a few starts in 2006. A guy that had zero starts was Stefan Lefors. I think that's how you pronounce his name, but he was a quarterback out of Louisville, and we picked him in the fourth round of the 2005 draft at pick 121. Never contributed worth a lick of anything, and that to me is depressing because we took let me five players after that who all played at least 10 games. And two of those players ended up playing over 100 games in the NFL. So we definitely got contributions in that 2005 draft, and he just wasn't one of them. So at number 5, he's the guy for me. At number 4, I'm actually going to go a guy that was taken in 2009. His name was Duke Robinson. He came out of Oklahoma, and he was a guard. We took him in the 5th round at pick 163. And again, didn't play a single game for us. The very next pick was obviously the Captain Munnerlyn pick. So both high on our hits list. I think on the misses list for a guy not to contribute a single game is disappointing.
Yeah, I was looking at the Stephon LaFour's pick. The Panthers drafted a Louisville running back in the second round that year who has 0 career rush attempts. He had 8 receptions throughout his career, or excuse me, he had 8 rush attempts throughout his career. Um,
He had one
but
reception. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Only
that's
only
like,
9 touches in
but
his
that's in
entire.
the second round. We're
Mhm.
lucky that this is limited to day 3 and beyond. I'm going through the list, and one person that I personally had expectations for, following a productive 2017 season, where obviously we make the playoffs, we fall short because the Saints beat us for a third time in that season. But the following draft was really when I started to hone in on draft stuff, and I'd done my homework on everybody, and at the end of the draft, Kendrick Norton, who's defensive tackle from Miami, I thought, you know what, he could like not round out, but with KK getting older, I think that was the year Star Lotulelei went to he went to the Bills right after the Panthers. I think that was 2018. I thought he could step in and contribute. Doesn't make the team and doesn't have any career snaps that I can see after that. And it's players like that that like you want to contribute, but just weren't able to get anything done. And that disappointed me because we were coming off of a playoff year. I thought we could build off of it. And obviously, out of that draft class, you have DJ Moore and Dante Jackson, but not too much after. Marquise Haynes was a viable rotation piece when he was healthy, but he was often injured. So,
And in the same breath of that, a player where you had expectations for Eric Norwood, we took in the fourth round pick
yeah.
in 2010. Frank Alexander in 2012, again another fourth round pick. Like these dart throws where you're like, oh, maybe this edge player will develop into like a quality rotational guy, like a Wes Horton or a Mario Alexander. And it never is it Mario Alexander?
Mario Addison.
Mario Addison. Yeah, I was like Mario Alexander is not the correct name, but yet those players where they were key contributors in various situations, and those guys never amounted to anything. Another guy more recently, where you're talking about like when we were actually more involved in kind of like the draft process and scouting guys, Brandon Smith most recently, that was a guy I was like, oh, maybe he can be a guy off the edge on like third
Oh,
downs, and never
the
never
Penn State
materialized.
linebacker.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
So and
that's gonna be up there for me. I was high on him.
and that's where it's like it's disappointing. Like they obviously played games, but their contributions were just so little. But moving on, my third guy was a guy we actually drafted in 2013, and it's Edmund Kabila, I believe. He was an offensive line guy that played at Valdosta State. He
Mhm.
was pick 108 in the fourth round. Again, played 0 games for us in a draft that was actually really pivotal for the Carolina Panthers. We reinforced the interior offensive line, getting Star Latulele, KK Short, And then in the fifth and the sixth round, I think we actually got quality pieces for special teams and defense, mainly with AJ Klein being the fifth round pick. And then our sixth round pick was Kenyon Barner, who was a key like third down back, special teams returner, key contributors, I would say, for the team over the next several years.
One person, I'm looking at this now, and it says he played in 45 games, but I can't think that
Huh.
that's true. Um, is Bravion Roy in 2020. He was a defensive tackle, somebody I was pretty high on from Baylor, Matt Rule guy. Um, and I liked his tape a lot. I thought that he would be productive, but it never really material. I thought he would go in like the second or third round, and that's where the consensus board had him as well. Fell to 184 in the sixth round. Says he played in 45
It
games, but
does, yeah.
that feels wrong. Um,
You can be a backup and suit up, like you're part of the 53-man
yeah,
roster, but he probably didn't have any snaps whatsoever.
Yeah, the only game I can remember him in, I think, was against the Ravens where he sacked Lamar or had a strip or something on Lamar. That's the only play I can remember, and I had such high expectations on him. He was in that all defense draft that Matt Rule had, the first
Mhm.
ever all defense draft during the COVID year where we were watching Goodell do the stuff from his basement. Um, he was in that draft, and obviously we get Derek Brown out of that draft, so you can't be too upset about it. But after Derek Brown, a lot of the guys were disappointing, and Bravion Roy was the most disappointing to me.
Very nice. Again, that's it, like some of these names. It's like you hear it again. It's like, oh, where do I know that guy from? And
Hmm.
he did have one start. He did have one sack, and I'm assuming that's the one you remember from Lamar Jackson. And yeah, it's some of these guys you have these high expectations for. Clearly, from a consensus standpoint, there was a lot going for him. At least when you turned on the tape at Baylor, but there was something off field or it wasn't going to translate, and that ended up coming to play out. My guy at number two, we're going back all the way to 1996, the going into the second year of the Carolina Panthers franchise. And it's a guy we took in the fifth round who, again, didn't start a single game for us, and that's Marquette Smith out of Central Florida. Again, a running back you thought would have contributed. We took three running backs actually four. Biaka, two. I'm just
Biaka
we all
Batuka.
there we go. Fans who know the Carolina Panther history know he was a pivotal guy. I think he was the first franchise player with like four touchdowns in a game. Then we took Winslow Oliver in the third round, took Marquette Smith in the fifth round. Again, didn't contribute anything. And then we took Scott Green in the sixth round that year, and he actually played in 34 games, starting in one game. So, not a contributor early to a young franchise, and that's disappointing in my opinion. So that's who I have at number two on this list.
So number two for me, and this is kind of a cop out because this guy actually played in some games, a significant amount of games. I just want to be sure. Yeah. So the brother of Mitchell Schwartz, who's very good all time for the Chiefs, a pretty good right tackle, a couple Pro
Oh
Bowls.
boy.
Jeff Schwartz, he wasn't super bad. Um, I he started 39 games throughout his career. He was okay in Carolina, but he's just a character on Twitter, and so that's why I put him here because I could just say, oh, another guy who didn't play on the team, but like personally, a lot of his tweets are just funny to me, so I'm putting him on here. And he wasn't a super high contributor either. Like he was in 2008, but once he was off the team, that's when we started making playoff runs. So
What's
correlation, causation, I'll let you guys decide.
he played in 74 games. Guy that you had in your top five, Dennis Daly, he played in 54 games. So played in a few more games. And their weighted AV, for what it's worth, Jeff Schwartz ended his career with 18. Dennis Daly ended his career with 14. And I agree with you. Jeff Schwartz, I think it's his off the field stuff and where you were a professional athlete. And there is a level of respect that comes with that. The fact that you are a part of the elite professional athletes is not to be taken away from, but he has definitely drug his name through the mud. So I agree with that sentiment, and I think it's fair that he's there. But at number one, and I think we have the same guy, it's Matt Rule's dude, and he tried to
Yeah.
replace a Panthers legend, arguably the second greatest special teams player in Carolina Panthers history. At least I will stand on that hill, and that's JJ Jansen. And they try to replace him with Thomas Fletcher, a 6th round pick, a guy that Matt Rule hung his hat for. Even though apparently, I think that same draft, that's when Brock Purdy got drafted, correct?
Would have been 21. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I think there, like Matt Rule came out after Purdy started winning. Oh yeah, we were high on him. Then why do you take a long snapper over like a
Hmm.
quarterback dart throw? Like at pick 222 out of Alabama, 6th round pick that never started a game for us because there was no way he was going to supplant JJ Jansen, who is still starting for the Carolina Panthers. So yeah, Thomas Fletcher for me is at number one on this list.
I'm all for, or we disagree on the idea of drafting specialty. I think if you can get a kicker or a punter in the 6th round or even the 5th round, my philosophy on day 3 picks. They're almost nothing to me. So I'm cool with, if you think a kicker is good, I'm cool with taking a kicker. If you think a punter is fine in the 7th round, I'm cool with that. I am absolutely not cool with drafting a long snapper in any capacity. And even though he's from Alabama, and I think this pick was, it set the franchise, or not franchise, I think it set the all-time record for players from a school from like this pick with Alabama. This was the Alabama team that won the national championship, blew out Ohio State. Um, but a long snapper in the 6th round. They had a 7th round pick too. Did you think he was going to be gone in the 7th round? Like no, and it was because Matt Rule and his staff coached the Senior Bowl, I believe, because we had a high pick that year, so they would have been at the Senior Bowl. And I guess Rule became friends with Thomas Fletcher. The famous draft call where he calls Fletcher's like, "Yo, you coming here or what?" Like Fletcher couldn't believe he had been drafted, as most long snappers don't get drafted. They're undrafted priority free agents. But even JJ Jansen, I think he was like a late 7th rounder for Green Bay, and then got waived by them and came to Carolina. He was either late 7th rounder or undrafted. I can't believe they wasted that pick. And even if it wasn't going to be Purdy, you could have found somebody that could have played special team snaps for you, like as a gunner or somebody on kickoff coverages. But Thomas Fletcher, if you recall, went on IR his first year. They said he had like an ankle injury or something, but in reality, it was JJ Jansen kind of exerting his will on Matt Rule, saying, "Look, dude, I'm not going anywhere. I was here 15 years before you were. I'm going to be here after you." And to his point, JJ Jansen is still here and he's already set the Carolina record for starts. He's like 20 starts away from the all-time NFL record. Like he's very close. If he keeps on trucking for, I think it's like 2 or 2.5 more seasons, he's going to be the all-time guy. So trying to replace such a franchise legend with that, I can't get over. JJ Jansen, by the way, one bad snap ever in his 16-year career now. And it was his first one, or it was in his rookie season. But since then, no misses on the field goals or on the punts. So trying to replace that level of competency has to be the all-time greatest miss after pick 100, maybe even before pick 100. But that's something we'll get to in later episodes.
He has started 16 plus games because we've obviously gone to 17 in 2021 since 2009. Just
Mm-hmm.
insane to start 277 games consecutively. He was initially signed by Green Bay, like you said. He got waived, kind of re signed again. He got placed on IR and then got traded to the Carolina Panthers, and then he's been a starter for us ever since. And to your point, like the usage of 6th, 7th round picks, when you start talking about just special teams players, it's about the number of snaps you get from them on a like a per game basis. Like how much are they actually contributing to your on field success? And you can obviously talk about like, hey, the high stakes that some of these field goals and finding guys that can make those in critical moments. The issue is usually the best players are still undrafted free agents. So taking dart throws on those players aren't the end of the world. I think from a contract standpoint, you can definitely argue against it. My thing would be is that we see enough like actual contributors, like borderline starters or special teams players, get moved for 6th, 7th round picks. And you can take gambles on guys that were quote unquote busts and see if they can contribute to your team and your roster. So I think there are better allocations of your resources than a special teams player. And I think the only argument could ever be a kicker or a punter who's actually touching the ball and impacting in a meaningful way. Whereas, like a long snapper, there's absolutely no reason you should be drafting a player like that. And I think that was just karma. It was karma trying to replace a Panthers legend with a draft pick. So with that, this episode has gone way over time, but it was good conversation. We obviously talked about the NBA GOAT debate. We touched on kind of the 12 personnel usage and evolution within the NFL and how the Panthers are adapting and where they might go from here. And then the top five hits and misses past pick 100, which I think is kind of keying us in on the theme of this episode. And it's just setting realistic expectations for how the Panthers are going to use their personnel, realistic expectations for what our day three picks this year are going to contribute, which I think leads into my perfect take this week, which is I think the only meaningful player that will come from this draft that will have quality starts and be someone that we look at as a key rotational piece. And I hope Will Lee and Zach Wheatley and the linebacker we took in the seventh, blanking out on his name right now, Jackson Kawach out of Miami, Ohio, who was Ohio State commit. Those guys, I hope they're key contributors. But for me, Sam Hecht is going to be the only guy we're talking about 4 or 5 years from now that was a key contributor, that became a starter and was a meaningful impact player in our rotation.
It's funny you mentioned that because my take is that Carolina will have two starters from this year's draft in the post 100 picks. Sam Hecht, I think, is going to end up starting this season. And I think down the line, Will Lee will also get starting reps, considering Mike Jack is about to be 31, I believe. I think he's turning 31 this year. So I like Will Lee's tape. I think he has the size to be a Dave Canales slash Dan Morgan slash Pete Carroll corner, because that's the philosophy that this team runs. But I think we're both high on Sam Hecht being an eventual starter. Realistic expectations is a good theme because next week we'll get to the. I imagine we'll get to the pre 100 hits and misses the week after because it was a longer conversation. But next week we're going to be talking about the Panthers' schedule as the schedule is getting released on Thursday. We record on Tuesdays as always. And if you want to talk about realistic expectations, I'm going to implore you to take a look at the Panthers' opponents for this upcoming season. I'll have an article that I wrote about it on Sports CLT if you want to look at the exact order in which the Panthers are playing them. But realistic expectations, that schedule is rough. Out of the all the non-playoff teams that weren't division opponents, we have the Bengals and Ravens, both of whom are very good teams, the very good quarterbacks when they're healthy. We got the Vikings and Lions, who both had better records than the Carolina Panthers, and then Cleveland, which you can consider Cleveland a win, but outside of that, it's going to be tough. So realistic expectations is a good theme for this episode and for next week. But until then, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your content. And until the schedule release and until next week, I'm Jacob, that's Steve, and keep pounding.